Good morning, everyone, and welcome to your morning briefing for Thursday, 30th of October, 2025. This is Robert standing in for Mike, and let's get started on the domestic sit rep. So yesterday, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association president, Nick Daniels, he said that ATC's anger over the government shutdown is growing, and this is after air traffic controllers missed their first full paycheck this week. Daniels also added that some of the air traffic controller recruits have dropped out of training since the government shutdown began, especially over concerns about uncertainty over pay and basically discontent with the shutdown, and that air travel disruptions are likely to worsen. And we've already reported on multiple ground stops that have been pushed by the FAA throughout the weekend and this week. And we're expecting increased travel disruptions as the government shutdown continues into next week. Moving over to California Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assembly Bill 1318 into law recently, and this is designed to protect state-level tax-exempt status of nonprofit groups in California, with the idea that if the Trump administration is serious about targeting left-leaning and nonprofits that support Antifa or violent protests, that this will help some of these nonprofits continue to operate at the state level if their federal tax-exempt status is revoked. And I do expect to see more blue states do something similar to this, especially if they have their own state income tax laws, which is what's allowing California to continue the state-level tax-exempt status. Democrats are urging the Illinois state legislature to reconsider voting on a new mid-decade congressional map. As we reported previously, some of these Republican or Democrat-controlled states have pushed back on putting out new mid-decade maps because either their state laws or state constitutions make it much more difficult, or like Illinois, they're already heavily gerrymandered for Democrats. But the Congressional Illinois Democratic group said that the Democrats have been left with no other option but to prevent, quote, MAGA extremists from rigging the 2026 election. And House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has also traveled to Illinois this week to push for this new map. And basically, this big mid-decade redistricting push is really being coordinated on both sides at the federal level. From Republicans, it's coming from the White House, and from Democrats, it's coming from House and Senate Democrat leaders. And in Ohio Republicans and Democrats seem to have agreed to a new mid-decade congressional map, which will make two of the Democrat-held House seats more competitive, rather than a map that Ohio GOP was potentially pushing that would have made or would have flipped two Democrat seats to likely Republican wins. And as part of this deal, this new map is also going to strengthen one of those Republican-held House seats and make it more conservative, increase the vote margin going into 2026. I think the idea behind this was that Ohio Republicans want to avoid having to go through the referendum process, which would have been the next step if they had gone past the November 1st deadline to get a new map deal done. And then finally, a former Department of Homeland Security official, Miles Taylor, launched a website called Defiance.org yesterday. And this is a web platform this group Defiance says is going to facilitate protests and other resistance efforts. And Taylor described the site as a clearinghouse for people who are seeking ways to engage in resistance efforts against the Trump administration. And he said it will act as a Google for Defiance. And this is in partnership with some other former national security officials and a bipartisan group of former lawmakers. And Miles Taylor was famously that DHS staffer who published an anonymous article in 2018, I believe in the New York Times, saying that there were internal resistance efforts within the DHS to prevent the, quote, worst excesses of President Trump during his first term. And now it looks like they are trying to build on the momentum of the No Kings protests in order to, in Taylor's own words, provide a source of information for people who want to get involved in this Trump resistance effort. And Jared, if you could come on and take us through the global sit rep, please.
Absolutely. So yesterday, Colombian President Petro announced acknowledged in Qatar that Colombian coca fields, the crop used for making cocaine, have actually expanded in 2024 despite his efforts. And per the Colombian Defense Ministry, Colombian authorities are actually on track to destroy even fewer fields in 2025 than they did in 2024. Now, this is important because Colombia's failure to curb narcotics is central to the deteriorating U.S.-Colombia relationship. Additionally, we talked about the request for fissile material yesterday from South Korea to the United States for nuclear-powered subs, and Trump not only approved it, but he approved South Korea to build a nuclear-powered sub in the Philadelphia shipyard, which is owned by Hanwha, one of the South Korean shipbuilders. Now, South Korea's defense minister says that they're going to build 4 of these things over there, and they're going to have to upgrade the Philadelphia shipyard even further in order to do so, which will in turn increase our ability to actually push out ships. Trump also announced that he also said that he had ordered the Department of War to immediately renew nuclear testing equal to other countries' testing programs. And it does look like this is potentially a response to the Russian nuclear-powered cruise missile test just last week.
So with this, this is a pretty big deal. We were talking before the show, and actually, you brought up that the last time the U.S. engaged in nuclear testing was like shortly after you were born.
Yes, that was the explosive nuclear testing. The U.S. still tests launch vehicles all the time, but the actual explosive test was September of '92, so right after I was born.
Okay, so this is a nuclear test of launch vehicles and not a nuclear test of devices?
This sounds like it's going to be a test of nuclear explosions, since we already do the launch vehicle testing.
Okay, well, yeah, that seems like a significant change in policy. Did you see anything coming out of the Trump administration saying why President Trump was ordering this new nuclear testing?
It is specifically to equal other countries' testing programs. Since they're already continuously testing, fine. We're going to continue. We're going to renew testing again.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Jared. If we could move on to the next slide, please. We're tracking 87 protests today. And if you see one of these dots near you, please post in the Forward Observer website forums any information that you're able to glean from your local protests. And we are now going to move on to the high side of the show. Jared, if you could move on to the next slide, where we're going to cover the Homeland Operation SITREP. And we are also going to talk about the imminent SNAP funding cutoff. You can join us at the high side if you go to forwardobserver.com/trial, where you can get a 7-day free trial and access to more of our report and our analysis. Please stand by, members. We're going to move over to the high side.